Here we go. All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to see what the delay is like tonight. Sometimes the delay is bad. Sometimes it's not so bad. I see we have a bunch of people in the chat, so thanks for joining. Today with me are Doug and Betsy Moore. They survived the trip west with me and are still talking to me and willing to participate in tonight's live stream. So excited to see everybody. We've got a lot of people on already. I see Mamie, Stephen, Dawn, Pat, Mary, Liz. I know Terry, Michelle, Norm in San Diego, Todd, Bobby, and a bunch more. So thanks for joining. If you're here and haven't let us know you're here, please say hi in the chat and let us know where you're from. Dawn says hello to the famous Doug and Betsy.
Hello,
as does Mamie.
Hi, Mamie.
Oh, Steve Berlew is here. Phil and Judy. Oh, hi, Phil and Judy. We haven't seen you guys in a while. I'm so glad you joined. So tonight's topic is about, you're going to see me taking glasses on and off. My apologies. Tonight's topic is about multi-destination travel and caravanning. And the reason I really wanted Doug and Betsy here is because they recently joined me on such a trip. We went across the country and up to Banff in Canada together. And I thought it was recent, it's fresh, a great opportunity to tap into their experience. It was their first trip of this type with the tab. Mm-hmm. And so I'm excited that they're here tonight. Bobby's got a new 360. Congratulations. That's awesome. I hope you like it as much as I do. We have Amanda Ball and Sandy joining us, Jay Strout, Annie, and a couple more. So thanks for joining. It looks like you've switched things around in the 360. It took a few seconds to realize you didn't. I didn't. Nope, still the same. It's a little neater than sometimes, but it's pretty much the same as it's been for a while.
It's very tidy tonight.
So let's just start. You can start popping questions in about multi-destination travel in the chat, and I'll try to keep up with them. But let's just start by talking about, what did you think? It was your first multi-destination trip overall?
It was better than I expected. I had a lot of reservations because I don't like to be in a car and drive. But it was really amazing. It was wonderful. And I'm not sure I'd want to go out that far again, but it was much, much better than I expected. I enjoyed it very much.
How many miles do you think we went? I didn't track it, but I'm guessing 5,000 plus or minus.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, so that's quite a trip. We hit a bunch of states, a few national parks, some other types of campgrounds along the way. When we started planning the trip, what was that like for you? How do you figure out where you're going to stay? How many hours a day to drive?
We wanted to go with Jen because she's done this before and was familiar with this process of planning, and we hadn't done anything like this. We've stayed out for a month at a time, but not with the multi-destinations. And so it was great to have somebody who was experienced with the planning.
So there wasn't anything for us to do.
Jen and Doug spent a number of evenings standing over maps, and I just kind of cooked for people.
And she does an excellent job of that.
So,
and fed dogs.
These are the planners.
I have done this once or twice, so it was pretty easy. But I tend to retain a lot of useless information up here, so that comes in handy. Here's a good question we had from Stephen. How many hours a day did you guys do each day on average? I would say it ranged. There was a range between 4 to 7 for the most part hours a day, usually in the 4 to 6 ballpark. We could have gone longer. We just talked about that. But it really made for a nice day to not be exhausted at the end. I'll say from my perspective, it's one of the first trips I came back and wasn't just completely exhausted because I didn't overdo it and try to drive too much.
That was really one of the parameters because I'm not a big fan of riding in the car or driving for any great length of time. We sort of set 5 hours as an average, and we, except for Jen stopping at all the pullouts.
I do like a good view.
And taking pictures of the 360.
I did take a few pictures of the 360.
Yeah, the trip out was very enjoyable.
Yeah, we on the way back we were more just going from Banff all the way back to Columbus, Ohio, and that took us about a week to do. So it was a little more focused, I guess I would say, and we didn't stop quite so much as we did on the way out.
No. But the stops, actually, I enjoyed those a lot. You got out, you stretched your legs, we talked, we laughed. There were things to look at. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's part of why we go, right?
Yeah.
See things. A question came in. What do you suggest is the most efficient way to tear down to head out on a long trip? I think you mean by tear down, I think you might mean pare down what we're bringing. I know I stopped. I've been gone, with the exception of an hour, I've been gone since May. So there's a difference between when I'm just camping, sort of what I would call locally. Pennsylvania, Ohio to me is local. And this type of travel. One of the things I did differently is I added my solar panels, and most of the places I'm at during the summer, because it's hot, are going to have shore power. So I didn't need solar. I packed my solar panels. I had to pack for 3-season clothing, essentially, because we did have the range of, when I was in the Badlands, it was almost 105 degrees. And when we were in Banff, I put on the base layer a few days because it was brisk. So I don't know that I packed tremendously less. I did, because I picked up the 360, I was able to leave my Dometic fridge at home, which took up a lot of space. You guys didn't bring everything you usually bring when you camp.
No.
We didn't bring our walker tent.
We did not bring our tent. We didn't bring any kind of canopy or clam or anything like that. Well, you had a clam.
I had a clam.
We didn't stay. Well, we did stay 5 days a couple of times, but we just were busy all day. It wasn't, and we were tired in the evening, so we didn't spend a lot of time outside, and we had gorgeous weather, so we didn't need anything.
Well, and to your point, we were still all pretty much on East Coast time for most of the trip. So we would go to bed by 9 o'clock. Yeah. It was it was the exception that we didn't. I think maybe once or twice, we
had fires and we stayed out later and
watched a movie a couple times, but it was mostly early to bed.
And early to rise.
Mary wants to know, did you take a couple day break every few days? That's actually something we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm. We did going out, but not coming back. And I think it makes a big difference to take a break. If I were to do this again, that's what I would do. And in fact, it's even kind of motivated me to, it's encouraged me to, when we go south in February and March, to maybe do it a little differently and go further south to start with, and then work our way up, just staying a couple of nights in each campground that we decide to stay at. So, or Cracker Barrel, that's the one night when you stay one night, because you're going to try to get someplace.
And we did that one night when we were together. We stayed at a Cracker Barrel. I knew of a Cracker Barrel that was pretty nice.
It was very nice.
Really nice space for the dogs and very clean and safe. And that worked out great.
Yeah, that was great.
We are getting asked by Dara, did you sit down and decide ahead of time which parks you'd go to on the way to Banff? Yes.
Very much.
Our route was, we had, and I see another question about, did you make reservations in advance for sites? And with the exception of a couple nights on the trip out, we had reservations every night. There was a campground that was first come, first serve that we did not have reservations for, but we were able to secure sites for. And then actually two, come to think of it. And then there was one campground that was closed for the season, but you could still camp there. Often it was a National Forest Service campground, and often they just closed the gate. But this particular campground you could camp in, there were just no amenities. You were dry camping, and that worked out for us. And in those cases, we had some ideas of what we might do if we couldn't get sites. When we were at Glacier, that was going to be a bit more challenging because in October on the east side of Glacier, there aren't a lot of options. It's pretty remote, but we lucked out. Did you ever vary from the original plans? I know I always do. Did we vary from the original plans?
We did change from the west side of the glacier to the east side, but I think that was early on. That was we didn't. We made the change, I think, before we left.
Before
I
we
think
left.
before we
Yeah.
left, yeah. But for the most part, we stuck to things as they were planned.
Right.
We built in some flexibility in case we needed to. I think we did on the way back. We weren't, especially on our way back, we didn't have any concrete plans. We were going to play it by ear because at that time of year, weather can be a factor. We had thought about visiting some of your family on the way back, and that didn't work out. So the plan sort of worked this time, but I've had to change my plans up.
We did change our plans on the way out west because we did see his sister in Minnesota, and we hadn't planned. That was a spur of the moment decision. So,
Mamie, I cannot tilt the camera. It's in webcam mode, so I can't control it, and it's just doing what it's doing. I don't know why, but it is. Unfortunately, this is the view we have. So,
Is it making us look older?
she said, the questions are covering Betsy's face. Well, I will stop showing questions then.
oh, that's okay.
Let me see. Liz is asking, saying we found that we book our primary destinations and supplement the in-between stuff. Cracker Barrel, Harvest Host, BW, and Corps of Engineers State Parks.
Is this Liz Cinco?
Yes.
I really appreciate on the Facebook pages, Liz, I look at yours and I know you travel a lot too. And I like it when people mention, oh, we're trying out new places to camp. We're trying out a fairgrounds or things like that. And I noticed that Liz and Frank had tried out a fairgrounds recently, I think. So
yeah.
I think those are very helpful suggestions and ideas.
We stayed at the KOA a couple times. Was it more than a couple times?
Yeah, I think it
On the way back, it was more, mostly.
was 2 KOAs and then
Yeah,
might have been 3.
We stayed at a KOA between Yellowstone and Glacier, so we could do laundry and charge up batteries because it was back-to-back dry camping and not everybody had a lithium package. Our friend Steve was with us for that part of the trip, and he does not have lithium. And we hit a couple KOAs on the way back, and they were just convenient when you're doing an overnight to be able to pull in. And we found the people pretty nice at the KOAs.
Yeah.
And they weren't crowded because of the season.
Yes, that's a great point. They were not at all crowded. Mary said we could have stayed at her sister's ranch at East Glacier. Oh,
wow.
Well, that would have been nice.
Where were you, Mary, when we needed you?
Did you guys travel together vehicle-wise, or did you just meet at predetermined stops? That's a great question. This is Stephen Joseph asking. And that goes to the caravanning. I was out there already because I had been out in Colorado for a family wedding and been out west for a few weeks. Then Steve joined me in the Badlands, and we met each other at Custer. We didn't travel together, but because we had different errands to run. And then Doug and Betsy met us at Custer.
Yes.
And from there, we more or less caravaned.
Caravan. Yeah.
And that's the first time I've really done any significant caravanning. I know Dawn and I have driven somewhat together, but not as closely as that for that long. And I liked it. I don't know. What was your reaction?
I was pleasantly surprised. And Jem was amazing because she would just find places where we could all pull off in a line.
And take pictures of all three campers.
And take pictures of all three campers. And we even went into the town of Ten Sleep in, it's Montana, right? Wyoming. It's in Wyoming. And shout out to Joe Pickett. And she found a place in the town right parked along the curb. And we got out and we took some pictures there and took a little walk around a park and went to the bathroom. So it was great. The
challenge is when you've got three campers together and you're stopping to get gas. So you've got you fortunately it worked every time, but it's interesting when you're pulling in, just eyeballing and thinking, how are we going to all get in here and get our gas and not be in people's way and get out without being shot.
I think we did all right.
It worked out. It worked out very well, but it could be a big bottleneck there.
Yeah.
If you had any more than three.
Yeah, especially small town gas stations. If you go to like a Love's, they tend to be a little more spacious, but some of those are a little more. I'm thinking of that place in DuBois, Wyoming, that was a little more cramped. That was the place with the jackalopes outside of the Tetons.
Yeah.
And it was a little more crowded, but it wasn't incredibly busy either.
No.
So it worked out pretty well. I think some things that I would say if I traveled with people like that again that worked out well were that I usually was first, then Steve, then Doug and Betsy. And Steve and Doug both left a lot of space so that if somebody wanted to pass us, they could pass us one at a time without having to try to get around two or three of us all at one shot. And because we didn't push it with the speed limit, I think we kept it pretty reasonable, and people do want to drive faster. That worked very well, I thought. I was pleasantly surprised with how stress-free that part of it was.
I'm glad it was stress-free for you, because you were the leader. I mean, you were always driving first, and I'm glad it wasn't too stressful. It was great on our end, being the caboose, but
yeah, it's a lot of fun. B Viewing says, hi all, how do you find people to caravan with in your area? How did you find me, Betsy?
Homeless shelter.
How did we meet?
We met in Columbus, Ohio at Alum Creek State Park. Jen was camping, and we were camping in our 400, and we were driving through the park.
I was driving, and Betsy says, "It's Matty Ross!"
I recognized Matty Ross. I recognized the camper. And Jen and Dawn and, Gina and Alex, you were all sitting out at the picnic table. And so I told Doug, stop! And I jumped out and I just said, we have a 400. We just got a 400. And they all got up. They were so friendly. They were...
Okay, but the bottom line here is that we'd gotten to know each other through new camping experiences.
Yes. And then was the Ohio-Pennsylvania group formed at that point?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yeah, you came and visited us once before you camped with us, and you went to U Camp. We really got to know you more at U Camp, and then we started inviting you along camping. And
Okay, but the more interesting person is Steve.
yeah, that's true.
He's a very interesting person. No,
No, because Steve is new.
He's new.
Steve started emailing me, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago with questions about tabs. And so we chatted a bit, but Steve, how did Steve end up on the trip with us? Does anybody know?
We're still trying to figure that out. No.
He thinks we invited him.
Actually, we very quickly decided that Steve's he's a guy that just seemed like somebody we've known for years.
Yeah, easygoing.
And we could it just seemed like it would be an easy addition to the trip.
Yeah.
We'd enjoy having him along.
Yeah, I think it's important that you find people who are similar in a variety of ways. I like people who are a little different than me, like Doug, but that share some similar goals, interests. One thing I love is the conversations we had. Doug and Betsy are incredibly curious people, and so I find that very interesting to have conversations with them. One thing I think the three of us had with Steve also is our faith is similar. We were able to spend a lot of time talking about our faith and spent time praying, which was really a highlight for me. So I think finding people who are similar can be a great way to get into the whole caravanning and traveling together.
And we were all, I think, fairly flexible. If I stayed back with the dogs sometimes, and Steve and Jen hiked, and other times Jen and Doug went out at dawn and took pictures of the sunrise. And if we didn't want to go out to a restaurant, we would just say, well, we're going to stay home. And so people were flexible, and that's, I think, an important characteristic.
Yes.
In general, I would say it's not a way to meet new people.
Yeah, I would not want to do this with people I didn't have a pretty comfortable relationship with. I felt very comfortable being honest with Doug and Betsy.
And Steve.
Although we're still not saying everything to Steve. Just kidding. Just kidding. Totally kidding.
Steve's on the chat, so.
Yes, we're harassing Steve, and he's not even here to defend himself. Signe made a really interesting comment that is classic Signe. She said she'll do anything to pack 3 tabs and tow vehicles into a Waffle House parking lot.
And take a picture.
Yes. Steven says the meetups are a great way to meet people you might want to travel with. Absolutely. If you're not part of a regional group like Ohio and Pennsylvania Tabs and Friends, Southeast Tabs, Midwest Tabs, New England Teardroppers, I think is one of them. Northern California, there's a whole bunch of them.
How do you find out what all those groups are?
I think Facebook groups like the Tab Tag and Tada group, Tab 360, Tab 320, Tab 400, Women Who Knew Camp. All those groups are great ways to find out about the regional groups and about events.
There's a moth out there.
Yeah, it's a moth named Steve. Dawn's sticking up for Steve. Poor Steve. Would you want a caravan with unknowns? I know of women who ask online if... Personally, I don't think I would be very anxious to caravan with people I didn't know well. I think if something would have happened to one of our vehicles or one of our campers, I think, first of all, small groups are better if you can, because you wouldn't want 10 people to be waylaid by a downed vehicle. But it was nice to have extra... Is he still out there harassing us?
Back here.
It would be nice to have another person there if something did go wrong, to help you think through things, problem solve. But in the same sense, I wouldn't want to be responsible for people I didn't know necessarily. But if something would have happened with you guys, I would have wanted to help,
Yes.
however I could. Seeing regional groups are a great way to meet people you want to travel with. Absolutely. Is there an Illinois group? Not that I know of, but Midwest Tabs would certainly cover you bee viewing. There's a Pacific Northwest group. There's a Midwest group. Yep. Love and Licks from Florida. From Flora. Oh, it's Jennifer. Flora.
Oh,
We got to meet Flora when we were in Canada.
Hello, Flora.
Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Jevons. How do you find things to do, places to see when you are planning a multi-destination trip? Are there apps you use or just Google fun places in XYZ? I'm going to be interested what other people say because I don't think everybody does what I do. I have done this. This is my third time on this similar trip, and I spend evenings while I'm watching TV. There's a reason I cannot make it through some series without missing the action. It's because I'm always multitasking and researching for the next trip while I'm watching something. So I spend hours doing research and Googling, and just I see something, I'm like, oh, that looks interesting, and I start doing a Google search. It leads me down rabbit holes. So I'm curious how other people, have you ever done anything where you've had to research a trip? How do you normally do it?
I have used Campendium. Used to use Road Trippers. We found the Mash Fork campground through Road Trippers on our way down to South Carolina.
It's in the south end of West Virginia. It's a great campsite. But the other thing I would add, it helps to be retired. Because
Yes.
you've got the time, you've got the flexibility, and you have the advantage of being able to go on the shoulders of the camping season. And that's because we went places that everybody wants to go. And the reason it worked for us is we went when everybody else is at work or when school's back in session and they've got to be at home. So that's, if you want to go to the great places, you just about have to go in the shoulder. And actually the
Or retire.
Yeah, the famous road through the glacier, going to the Sun Road, it closed the week after we were there. It closed for the season the week after we were there.
Yeah, so there are risks to the shoulder.
There are risks.
Because the first time I went to Glacier, the east side of Glacier had 5 feet of snow. Mm-hmm. So I didn't get to do Going to the Sun, and I couldn't camp on the east side. Yeah. But I've been 3 times, and it's only happened once. So it's not the norm, but it can happen.
Or you go south instead.
Yes.
You hit Zion and Arches and
Bryce,
yeah.
Grand Canyon.
North Rim, and don't have the risk of things being closed.
Yes, but it's more adventurous with
it's fun to take
potential.
Some risk.
Yes, that's right. Betsy's not so much a fan of the risk.
Much of a risk
and Jen likes to go with me because she knows I'll push the envelope. And Betsy just would rather I not.
There's probably some truth in all that.
More than I want to admit.
But I think, too, as far as finding things to do, most of these parks, if you just were to Google, 5 things to do at Glacier National Park or near Glacier National Park, you'd get all sorts of resources. And, one thing I've started using and I've recommended other people use with success is a AI assistant. I use Microsoft Copilot. It's free. If you just go to bing.com, Copilot's built in, you click the little icon, and I've said things like, help me plan a road trip for 5 days from point A to point B with stops every 8 hours or 6 hours or how many ever hours. And I prefer to stay at state park campgrounds.
That's really specific. That's great.
Yes, the more detail you give these chat AI services, the better results you're going to get. So tell it what you want, and it'll give you all sorts of information. I've used it for some of our group events when I've said, what are some things of interest near Keystone State Park? Mm-hmm. And it gives me a whole list. So that's something I've really started to incorporate in all my planning is the use of AI. I'm seeing a couple comments here. Liz says she uses Pinterest for planning, and it can turn into going down a rabbit hole too. Yep. Stephen Joseph has a great comment. Finding out what people have snack-wise is an important first step in determining if you want to caravan with somebody. Chocolate chip cookies on board? Okay, I'll travel with you. And I have had Betsy's food before.
In fact, I just brought you a chocolate chip cookie
She
tonight.
She did. She brought me
Homemade.
a chocolate. Are they homemade?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait to eat it.
Brussels sprouts, find somebody else.
Now, wait a minute. I like Brussels sprouts too. Jen has had salad at my house before.
I do eat salad. Mamie said, or if they have an ice maker. I can live without the ice maker.
I'm going to ask for one for Christmas.
Are you?
Yeah.
Sense of humor helps too.
Sense of humor, yeah. Just ask Steve. Unfortunately, Steve bore the brunt of many of our jokes and teasing. He was a good sport.
He was a very good sport. He still is.
Todd said someone has to bring the pizza oven and ice cream maker. Starting to sound like a lot of stuff to me. So Jay Stroud says she's planning, or he, I'm not sure if Jay is a man or a woman, planning a trip from Washington State to Texas with their daughter. First long trip since the 90s. Look forward to meeting other TAB campers. We met a lot of TAG. Did we meet? We met Barefoot owner.
Yes, in Canada.
Yeah. So everywhere I went, the first night I was in the Badlands, I heard I was going to knock, but then Rocky would bark. A knock at the door, and I opened the door, and the person said, "Jen?" And it was the Barbara Cornell Smith, who just bought a 360. So we had two 360s in the Badlands, and we must have been some of the first on the road with a 360 at that point. So, but we met people from, I think they were from Quebec. We met people from all over while we were on the road. It's fun. The TAB community is very friendly and usually wants to meet each other.
Yes.
Irene, I'm not sure what you meant. Oh, you corrected it. I think it's important to be similar in morning people or late night people. We were pretty similar, weren't we? We were ready for bed.
We were, but if two people wanted to stay up late, they stayed up late.
Yeah. Well, for the first part of the trip, I was still working and had conference calls at 6 a.m. I probably went to bed, I think, earlier than the rest of you guys did. So that can work as long as you understand and respect the differences and allow for those differences. I think that part could work.
Yes, and there are just times when you don't want to be with everybody, People like their downtime too. And I think we were all, it was just easy to say, well, I need some downtime, or I'm going to go read, or something like that. And it was nice to have more than one person, so you weren't letting somebody down if you wanted to go take a nap. Or
yeah, she stuck me with Doug all the time.
He just laid down on your rug and go to sleep.
He did lay down on my rug, didn't he? Mary asked, will you consider an Alaskan caravan or haha caravan? I'm not sure I would take my TAB to Alaska or not. That's something I go back and forth on. I've heard it can be brutal on your camper. I know people who've done it. I'm not sure if that's something I will do or not. Jennifer says, Doug and Betsy had me at wine.
It was wonderful to meet you. I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, hi, Melissa from Oregon. Has anyone ever attempted to maintain a list of folks wanting to caravan to popular destinations? Not that I'm aware of, but I have heard of people caravanning to different rallies. So that might be something if you're going to go to one of Mandy and Kendrick's rallies, or U Camp, or one of the other regional events, that's a great way to sort of get started with that.
I think so.
Did you guys have a pre-trip meeting to talk about some of these things? Oh, yes. I think we started in January,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and then we talked a few times throughout the year. We'd do some video chats, and then I was at their house 4th of July, was it, or Memorial Day, or both? Did I go?
I think you stayed from January to the 4th of July.
And then we talked at
you camp?
Huntington Beach too.
Oh, Huntington Beach. Yeah. So we spent a lot of time talking about it. And it's interesting because things changed from when we first started talking about it. I was in Maddie Ross, which Maddie, if you don't know, Maddie Ross is my 320, and Doug and Betsy were in a different 400, and they originally weren't bringing their dogs. And so by the time we left, I was in the 360 prototype, and I'm still in it right now. Doug and Betsy have a new 400, a 2024 400, and their dogs came with us. So there were things and Steve came, it was added. Steve added, we added Steve
probably
July. We talked about July 4th, I think.
Summer.
Yeah.
And Steve has a great dog. That's why he came along.
Yeah, it was really for his dog. Although his dog won't leave Rocky alone.
Hi, buddy.
Have you started planning next year's trip yet? I have not. There's a lot. I think my calendar's somewhat uncertain next year. There's some other events I might get pulled into, but I have started thinking about it, but I haven't really got much past just wondering. So Steve says, thanks in all caps. I think that was a sarcastic thanks. Any tab groups that you're aware of in the Virginia, North Carolina area? Vonda asks. Yes, there's a Southeastern tab group that's very active. So that would be a group for you to plug into. And then you're always welcome to the Ohio PA Tabs and Friends. Stephen has come up from North Carolina, Mamie from Michigan. We Joyce and Steve Van, Sherrill. Yep, we get a lot of people from out of state. The Southeastern Tabs groups. Yeah, we've had a lot of people from all over the place come. Let's see, I'm catching up to some of the other comments and questions I may have missed. The other thing that was something we worked out when we were caravanning was gas stops, because Doug and Betsy's car seemed to run out of gas just a little bit ahead of mine. So the only time that was challenging was when we were in Canada and their cell plan didn't work. So we had to stop and actually have face-to-face communications. And that really wasn't a big deal at all. But keeping track, that's why I think the bigger the caravan, the harder it is. Yes. You'd probably want to set more. We're going to stop in 2 hours or every 2.5 hours. Something like that. That's a little more regimented, I guess. We were pretty casual about it. We usually stopped when I had to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, we just call on the telephone and have a conversation, and we have 50 miles. We go 50 miles, and so start looking for gas stations.
Yeah, you don't want to push it out there because gas stations can be few and far between. Do you ever take a trip without any planning, just take off and go? Probably not that degree, Norm, but when I went to Colorado this summer, I had one reservation and I was going to be there for about 6 weeks. So I really didn't have a lot planned. I just played it by ear and did a lot of boondocking.
One other thing that I just remembered was that I was going to suggest when we were planning early, part of that was because we were going to places we knew, even in the off season, could be hard to get into.
Yes.
Hard to find, 3 sites in the same campground. And so we did make reservations. We made some reservations in January. So it's important to look out as far as you can. I mean, you can always cancel it, but you can't always find it at the last minute.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And when Steve was a late ad, and Steve did struggle at a couple of those places to find sites. And we
he
wanted,
wasn't always at the same campground at the same time when we were.
correct, like Custer and
Mhm,
Yellowstone.
mhm.
The first come first serve was a little easier, but it's also a little riskier. But that's a great point, Doug. Even in the off season, some of these big parks can get packed, and you also have to pay attention to when they close for the season. A lot of the Yellowstone campgrounds were closed when we were there, so we only had a couple options. Dennis says, Scott Hausman and Carol and I have caravanned after UCamp rallies, and it's fun traveling and a comfort of working together to a destination. Plus, we get to dog sit Nixie when Scott jogs. I know that's a big sacrifice for you, Dennis. Nixie's such a great dog.
She's a beautiful, beautiful dog.
That had to be tough in Glacier, 3 sites. It actually was, we got there early. That was part of it.
Early, yeah.
And I think that knowing that it could be tough, we camped somewhere the night before that would be a short drive that morning so we could get there in the morning. We got there right around 10 o'clock, which is usually a time people are starting to take off. So that worked out really well.
It was still fairly heavily occupied despite that. It was good that we got there when we did.
That's the thing about first come, first serve campsites or boondocking spots. The earlier you get in, the better your chances. When you arrive late in the day, sometimes it can be better to stop somewhere that's not quite there with a reservation or at a KOA last minute, and then get up early the next morning so you can get a site, rather than get there and not have a site. Todd says, I have a longish trip from Maryland to Austin, then to Michigan next July. Would be nice to meet up with people along the way. Todd, I have in the past sort of thrown my itinerary out in the Facebook groups and asked if anybody wanted to meet up along the way, and met up with people. So that even just sometimes for coffee, that can be a great thing. I know a few times when I've gone out west, I've been able to meet up with my cousin Mary and her husband Craig. And that's been a lot of fun to have just one night with them on the way out. So it's a great way to, especially if you're a solo traveler, to inject some connection with people in it and break up the monotony, because there's something different about spending an evening chatting with people than just being by yourself, making dinner, sitting outside, then going to bed. I don't know what it is, but mentally it refreshes you in a way.
We met friends at Custer and Yellowstone.
Oh, that's right.
That were traveling from, actually, we've known them for a long, long time. So our paths just kind of crossed, and we got to hook up there. That was fun.
And Colette gave us a great tip about the wolves. So that was nice. They were seeing some things we weren't. We got to see wolves when we were at Yellowstone, which is pretty rare.
Pictures,
that was a lot of fun. Pretty neat.
We got to meet Jennifer and Scott.
That's right.
Really nice.
Yeah, this is the third time I've camped with Jennifer and Scott when I've been up in Canada. So I really enjoyed that and got to see Robin. I don't think you met Robin. You were taking a nap. But Robin is a former Tab owner who lives up there, and I always enjoy seeing her. Marty was out of the country, but it was really great. That's right. Steve met friends in the Badlands. I met up with Amanda when I was in Colorado, Amanda Ball. We camped together for a couple nights. It's sort of the beauty of meeting people. I met Amanda at UCamp 2 years ago, and we had tried to connect the year before. It didn't work out, but I loved getting to spend some time with her. That was a lot of fun. It breaks it up, makes it different.
Yeah.
B Viewing says, I look for other Tab people at dog shows. Well, you should meet our friend Signe. Signe goes to the Bernese Mountain Dog shows.
And the casino.
And you might see Mamie at the casino, too. Dennis wants to know, did you set a time limit, as in stop by a certain time after a day of traveling, and why? I think we did more that type of planning in the morning, how far we wanted to go. And we were just talking earlier, it was usually about 300 to 350 miles a day on average. And it was more or less just to keep us fresh so we weren't exhausted.
And to have enough time if you wanted to stop at at 10 sleep, just because it's a place in a book that we've read many novels about.
Only
And
it's called 12 Sleeps in the book.
But anyway, we could spend an hour just walking around this town of 500 people and enjoying it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just have a short drive to be relaxed, but to have a short drive in case there was a pull off where Jen wanted to take 2,000 pictures, and we could be happy for her.
I guess I didn't realize how much I stopped.
No one complained.
No. And I didn't care if they did. Let's see. Am I caught up? I might be all caught up. We traveled with John Parsons once. I'm sorry. No, I'm kidding. I love John Parsons. We decided it was easier to set a destination to meet up and spend the night. You know, sometimes that is easier. I've done that with people too. Like Steve and I, the one day we were both going from the Badlands to Custer, but I had a grooming appointment for Rocky in Rapid City. I had a Walmart pickup scheduled. I needed to get an oil change. So I had a bunch of stuff to do. Steve had some things he wanted to do. So we just met up at the campground later that night.
Yeah, and if you're traveling with somebody that you can have that kind of flexibility, it makes it that much more pleasant.
I would say at this point, I'm almost scared to travel with anybody else because our trip it clicked. It was great. It was great.
Yeah.
Yes, even with Steve.
I would recommend Steve as a traveling companion.
Yeah, Steve would be. Steve is probably willing to go with just about anybody, as long as you have enough time for him to stop and talk to every single person he meets and wave. Mamie says, posting in regional groups that you will be visiting a certain state helps put together a coffee or camping meetup. Yep, 100% agree. What was everyone's favorite park or place you stayed at and why?
Banff was it was magnificent. I thought Glacier was amazing, and then did you see that?
No, is he out there? Steve is like getting creepy on us.
Banff was just gorgeous. Glacier was phenomenal. I liked Yellowstone because of the variation of mountains and meadows and all the wildlife, and it was beautiful too. I'd never been there, and I really like Custer, and I'd been to Custer before, so those parks I enjoyed quite a bit.
I just had a great time. Although an interesting thing is it just kind of kept ramping up. I'd been to Custer and liked it. I'd been to the Tetons 50 years ago and thought it was just the most beautiful place in the world. And then I went to Glacier and it was better. And then I got to Banff and it was better than Glacier. And so it was just that whole cruise up the Rocky Spine there is just, it's a phenomenal trip. And the timing was perfect. And there was a campsite that we went to that we will not share the name of.
Yeah, we did find a nice little spot in an undisclosed location.
And we did have beautiful weather. And
yes,
I've done enough traveling to know that bad weather doesn't spoil things, but good weather does enhance the experience, I think, a lot of times.
Yeah, I think Banff is probably my favorite of the trip. It's just
it's spectacular.
It is really spectacular. And it always overwhelms me because it's in every direction. It's not just one way, but it's 360 degrees. Or is it 365?
60.
60. I was right the first time.
360.
Like the 360.
Like the 360.
Like the 360 views in the tab 360.
Perhaps it was named a 360 because of windows all around.
Could be. But I mean, it's a little bit of sensory overload because they're just, you don't run out of amazing views. I actually have a harder time taking pictures when I go to Banff because it could be in so many different directions. It's just beautiful. And we got to see the Aurora Borealis when we were in Banff, right from the campground. I had gone out the night before by myself to a spot that was pretty popular and saw it a little bit, but there was too much traffic lights interfering. The next night we were in the campground and these two women pointed out that the Aurora, it was sort of a funny story because I was taking trash to the trash and Doug insisted on escorting me like a good gentleman. And we came back and these two women were out pointing.
They were from Germany.
They were from Germany and they were so excited because they could see the Aurora. So we went out and it was really pretty remarkable. It wasn't the night that everybody in the East saw it. And you guys actually saw it better than we did when I saw the pictures everybody posted, but it was still amazing. And I'm so grateful we got to see it because I've always wanted to see the Aurora Borealis.
And we were not attacked by bears.
We were not attacked by bears. We did have bears.
But we did have our bear spray.
And Betsy knew how to use it.
And
but I didn't use it.
And we saw a rutting elk battling it out, antler to antler, on the golf greens at Banff Golf Course.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. They were far enough away for us to be safe, but it was close enough you really could see it.
You could hear the antlers.
You could hear them, yeah. And we saw a coyote in Yellowstone. That was, Doug and I were out, I think, sort of talking about the weather for the day or something like that. And it just sort of trotted through.
Amanda barked.
Their schnauzer barked at the coyote and chased it away. But it was probably 5 to 10 feet from us. Yeah. Very close. It was really neat. We saw some bears.
Mm-hmm. We saw bears.
We saw bighorn sheep. Mm-hmm. I saw mountain goats. I don't know if you were with us. No, we saw them in Spearfish Canyon in South Dakota. Oh, Steve and I did.
I didn't see that.
I saw a badger in the Tetons.
I saw a picture of a badger. Video.
But you saw the holes from the badger.
Yes.
I mean, here's a tip. If you camp at Gros Ventre in the A-Loop, the holes are enormous, like big enough you could break a leg.
Yeah.
Serious holes. Mary asks a question. Was there any tab service centers for you if you're out west? I think it's New Camp has one service center in Sugar Creek, Ohio. Truma, which makes Alda, has service centers in Florida and Indiana, but there are authorized Truma dealers and repair centers throughout the country. But the tricky part about RV repairs is that most RV dealers will not service you unless you bought from them. Or if they will service you, you're going to be at the back of the line. They're going to and understandably, they're going to prioritize their customers. If you need an emergency repair, in most cases, you're going to be better off either with a Camping World, and I know that they get some mixed reviews from people. I had a good experience once when I needed something early days back in 2014, or a Mobile RV Tech. Yeah. For the first time, and I knew this would happen to me eventually. You can't tow as much as I do without this eventually happening. My 7-pin cord came out at one point and dragged, so I needed to have it replaced, and I used a Mobile RV Tech for that. But yeah, New Camp Service Center is in Sugar Creek, Ohio, and it's well worth the drive. Sugar Creek is an amazing place unless you're on a diet. Then it's a really bad place. I said to my brother the other day, it's a good thing I'm leaving Sugar Creek. I was in Sugar Creek for a few days. I said, I cannot afford to keep eating here. The food is too good.
And if you take your camper to Sugar Creek to be serviced, there are several full hookup sites that you can stay
for free
at the evening before you drop your camper off.
And Betsy and I spent our 48th wedding anniversary on one of those sites, and Cindy Young was celebrated with us because she was there with her camper also for service.
So Doug and Betsy have this new pattern of celebrating their anniversary with other tab owners.
Yes.
This year is their 50th anniversary,
Yes.
which I think is really amazing. And wasn't it romantic that they took me on the trip with them? Sue Oldani said, I've called New Camp from Seattle on a trip and they mailed me a replacement part. Yes, they are very good about getting you a part.
We needed a part, and we had some trouble with our drawers on our second day of the trip, and they sent us parts to
Custer
State Park, and I picked them up there and put them on.
So they're great about getting things quickly and being flexible about where it's going. I think our stalker's out there. Yeah, I heard him coughing.
Didn't see his flashlight.
Mary says happy anniversary.
Oh, thank you.
I think 50 years is pretty impressive.
If she only knew.
We've only been together 5 of those.
One of my favorite pictures, and it's favorite not because it's a great picture, but just because it's so hilarious to me, is on the gondola. Where's Doug and Betsy and me? And I'm like, I feel like I'm photobombing their gondola. We do have ones with just them, with me not photobombing. Dawn says happy anniversary.
Thank you, Dawn.
Side hug, Dawn.
So we're wrapping up. I thanks for being on this. Thanks for traveling with me. I have told them this trip was one of the best trips I've ever had, and it was mostly because Doug and Betsy are such amazing people. I really do mean that. Yes, you knew that.
Well, we want to thank you because we feel like you took us. You were already going, and we just kind of horned in on your trip.
And you took us for a ride.
And thanks to everybody who watched tonight, joined, shared your comments and questions. As always, your questions make it go so quickly, and we had fun. And I'll see you.
We sure do love the tab community.
Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.